Hey viewers, welcome back to the channel. Another update on the crypto mining project. So the room is done, more or less. So drywall's been finished and it has been painted. A very quick finish and a very quick paint job. So I mean, I can see the imperfections. It's quite all right because this is a utility closet, right? So it's it didn't have to be perfect, and since I hung the drywall, it didn't have a good shot at being perfect, so that's okay. So I figured I'd take you through kind of the initial electrical setup. I'm 98% there and ran out parts, so I figured this is a good opportunity to take you through it. So starting off, coming out of the wall, right? If you recall from previous episodes, we have that big like 125 amp SDR cable that was feeding the furnace sub panel right up in the attic. Well, so we've basically taken that, cut it, and rerouted it. So I'm coming out of the wall through that LB, and you can see the nastiness of that. So when trying to plan this, right, I brought the wire out where I thought it was going to go, best guess, right, for how I needed to mount everything. And I was not exact, so I had to move it a bit, and this is the result. You know, I would love to have that sitting a little more flush, but it's, you know, the reality is this stuff isn't easy. You know, working with these big conductors, it's not easy. And, you know, this is my first real experience with it. So trying to not let good be the enemy of great, or great be the enemy of good. You know, I was like, okay, I got it. It's stable. It's secure. That should be fine, right? You know, I can mud over, you know, the rest of that. To the electricians in the audience, like that transition, right, going from SER cable into conduit like that, I don't know what the proper transition of that would actually be. If I had to guess, if I were a guessing man, I would say probably maybe get some sort of conduit stub out there and then transition to an NM clamp to actually clamp on the SER. I could have done that. Honestly, I just didn't have the parts, so I just ran the cable straight up into the LB. And so I use that as a transition to the LB, fed it up into a 45, and then straight piece into the junction box. And all this, I guess all this big conduit is 1.5 inch EMT. And then the small stuff is just 1/2 inch. So coming up into here, we have a junction box. And the reason this exists is because I didn't want to have to go spend, you know, $300 or so on a new run of SER cable because mine wasn't long enough, or I had to splice or whatever. So I had a piece of scrap from the previous run to the attic, and it was long enough to where, hey, I could just make a junction and use that scrap and I'm good. So I did this junction box, just a 12 by 12 metal box. I thought about trying to get away with 10 by 10, and I'm glad I went with the bigger one because these big cables are just hard to work with, right? These are, I'm trying to remember. I think they're either 2-aught or 1-aught aluminum for the big stuff. And then I believe that's a number 1 stranded ground. So these are just splices, right? And for the big cables, you use these special connectors called Polaris connectors. And they just connect the 2 wires essentially. So I've got 4 of them, right? There's my 2 hots there, and all this is live, so I'm not touching circuits. There's my neutral up there. And then for the ground, I have a 3-way here. So I've got the 2, you know, stranded grounds there. And then I have to bond this junction box, right? And as near as I could figure, if I found the right table in the NEC, since I've got like 2, I think it goes by amperage, right? So at 125 amps, which is what I'm sizing this for, my bonding conductor for this box should be either a number 8 copper or number 6 aluminum, I think is what I need. So I had some number 4 aluminum just laying around, scrap, so I just used a piece of that. So a little bit bigger than needed, but it's free, so I like free. So coming off of that, we have this 1.5 inch, you know, EMT conduit coming and then bending around into the box here. Now the box is a bit of a rat's nest. And the reason is I've got the Emporia like smart electrical monitor where I can monitor the power consumption of all the circuits. And it uses these these current clamps, right, to measure the current on the wire. And so because of that, you just, by necessity, there's just a lot of wire, you know, coming in here. And I haven't taken a chance yet to really like try to address that. So maybe in the future. So I basically have the 2 current clamps for the mains coming in, and then each branch circuit I can monitor. So let me take you through this. So first off, you know, just a main lug panel, sub panel coming in, right? And I did a ground bar on the left side to land the incoming wire, right? Just with a neutral kit on the lug. You can kind of see it in there. My first circuit is that 240 volt, 20 amp circuit right there. That is feeding the 1 minor so far. All right, so 240 volt circuit, 2 hots in the ground, no neutral. And so that runs all the way over here, this 1/2 inch. And takes a funky jaunt because, quite honest, these boxes moved on me. And by the time I realized it moved, I already had anchors in the wall and everything. I'm like, ugh. So I may raise those up in the future just to get that more level and, you know, and whatnot. But it works for now. So again, just used I bent all the EMT just with a normal bender, right? And then for the outside corners, I just got those outside corner pull elbows. Those work really nice, I think, especially for the small stuff. It's worth noting here with EMT, I didn't have to run the green, right? The grounding conductor. I could have used the EMT as the grounding path, right? Fault current path, but if a connection ever gets loose, it could compromise it. I just didn't like it. You know, I think there are many schools of thought on that, and wire's cheap relatively, especially for this shorter run. So I just ran a grounding conductor along with it. So in this box, I basically have a bunch of pigtails to daisy chain these 2 240 volt outlets. Now, normally you don't do this, right? Normally, like in a 240 volt circuit, that's like a dedicated circuit. You got like one outlet that's the wire's tied to, and that's it, right? So this is uncommon. And the reason is because the minor, you know, especially Bitmain's minors, like their S17s, S19s, and so on, like they have 2 power plugs on them. So rather than having like one plug, for whatever reason, that handles all the power, which would be, you know, 18 amps or so, they want 2 to split the load. So I don't like it. I wish there was just one, but that's how they did it. So consequently, I got 2 outlets. These outlets I chose are NEMA L620Rs. And I figured that's a good opportunity to at least explain that nomenclature if you've never heard it. So every plug type, you know, from that kind to your standard, you know, wall outlet, they all have a designation, right? And they all mean something. So in this case, NEMA is the governing body that standardizes all this stuff in the US. So the L stands for locking. These are locking plugs. So I plug it in and then I give it a twist and it stays in and it won't come out. I figured that's a good choice for a minor because it's pulling lots of current all the time. So you don't want that plug to accidentally ever halfway come out or anything like that. So locking plugs are good. So the L on, you know, if a receptacle, you know, or a plug isn't locking, then there's no L, right? So 6, the 6 means 240 volt. If it were a 120 volt, like this one here, it'd be a 5, right? So that's a NEMA 515R, okay? The next number, a 20 in this case, is the amperage. So that's 20 amp there, right? And then that is a 15 amp there. So, right, 515R, you know, L620R, right? So the last piece is the R, stands for receptacle, right? The female end. The plug that goes into it would be in this case, it'd be a L620P, right, for the plug. And do I have that? I'll show you what that looks like. We're walking. So it's this funky little guy here, right? And you can kind of see how those kind of lock in place, right, with those tines. And it's also worth noting, just so you know which way's up, right? The ground pin is the one that's longer. So you have 2 hots here and then a ground. And the ground is longer so that the ground is inserted first and makes contact in the receptacle first before the hots do. That way, if there's any problems, you have a ground fault, you know, a path for all the fault current. So good design, I think. So that's that circuit. next up is I got to feed the sub panel that I just cut off, right? So that is that 100 amp right there. So really, it could be 125 amp. Ideally, I would do 125 amp just to have the extra headroom, but I couldn't find 125 amp breakers because we're still, you know, COVID, post-COVID, and materials are hard to come by. So I was able to get 100. So 100 will do. The only time that might not do is if I've got the emergency heat with all the heat strips going full bore. And that hasn't happened yet. I haven't turned those heat strips on, and we've gotten, you know, some of the coldest cold snaps that we typically get around here. So I think we'll be okay. Going on down, that dual 15 amp, right? 240 volt 15 amp, that is to power the current monitor, that Emporium current monitor. Their instructions say you can either, you know, tap existing 15 amp breakers, which I don't have any, or if you have spares, put in two 15s. They actually in their diagram say two single 15s, but I didn't like that because I mean the whole purpose of that thing is it's trying to measure, you know, phase to phase current and all that, and you know, all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, why would I ever want this half on, right? I would want a common trip and all that. So that's why I went ahead and did a 2-pole. And I've got the current monitors on the Emporium kind of looping back so it can monitor its own current. Not that it would do much, but I had the sensors, so why not? Because that thing came with like 16 sensors. So I have a bunch I'm not using right now. And the last circuit is the kind of convenient circuit. It's a single 120 volt, 20 amp, and I've got that breaker double tapped, which is to code. One tap is feeding just this GFCI convenience outlet, just so I've got a plug in here for power. It was helpful, just running the vacuum to clean up after I was done. So that's handy. And the other one goes to the lighting. So in this case, we'll go over here. I guess you can see there's the furnace Romex cable, you know, going up and through the ceiling. I thought about rolling that in the conduit just to make it cleaner, but I would have had to punch a new hole, and I didn't have an elbow in the conduit, and so I just said, I'll just use the NM cable clamp like that and run it like that. So yeah, it's exposed, but this is an attic area. It's not that big of a deal, I think. You know, next time I tear into this at, you know, phase 2 or whatever, maybe I'll run conduit, but it'd be kind of a bear to get conduit in here at this point. So I decided to do that. And then I bent this ugly looking offset to hook up to the switch, right? And then, right, lights. So we go up, we gotta go around that box. Remember, we framed all this stuff out to avoid all the air conditioning lines and whatnot. And then we just go to just light bulbs, right? Just 2 light bulbs. And that's it. Nothing fancy. Literally the same lights I ripped out, right? Just in new boxes with new wire. So that is it. Next video on this topic should be with the miner all set up. I did power it up, and it does work. I'm tapping Ethernet for now off of my game room. You can see I just pulled one of those out of the back wall. Event, you know, phase 2, which you'll see. I'll get like a proper switch up here with a network drop. But for one miner, I can just do this and call it good and do it on the cheap, right? So I fired the miner up, and I guess I can show you the miner. Sneak peek. There she is. Right there. That is what a Bitcoin miner looks like, at least one of them. Antminer S17 Plus, I think. 73 terahash. And it works. I had a couple surprises when I booted it up. First off, it is not running the stock Bitmain software. It is running something called Brain OS, which seems like, from what I gathered, is a common kind of third-party mining, you know, OS for these ASIC miners that a lot of mining pools use and whatnot. And the third thing is that I didn't know the password to log in. So I needed the root password to log in, and it wasn't the ones you'd think. So I messaged the eBay seller, and so hopefully he'll get back with me. Actually, as I'm filming this, I got a message from him. So I'm hoping it's a message of, oh yeah, sorry man, here's the password, versus, oh man, I don't know what the password is. That'll be fun. Then I have to recover this thing, and I'm not exactly sure how to do that. So that's that'll be interesting. But I'll bring you along for the adventure, huh? So that's it. I guess this is episode 3, maybe? I don't know. But so next episode, I will show you the miner up and running and talk about my experience so far. And honestly, after that, this series will probably be pretty dark for a while until I start phase 2. And phase 2 will be bringing in a network drop into here from the network closet. So I'll bring a fiber run up here into a network rack, and then a switch, a proper switch. And then much like here, I'm going to do power drops, you know, along the top there, right? I will do the same thing for Ethernet, right? I'll come this way and start bringing Ethernet jacks so I can plug all these guys in. So, okay, I think that's it. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.